My parents threw me out, pregnant and bleeding in the rain. My mother screamed while pushing me into the storm. "Never come back here, you're dead to us." 20 years later, I returned to that house. Not as the rejected daughter, but as the owner of everything. Hello, my dear ones. How wonderful to have you here with me once again. Come on in, make yourselves comfortable. I'm here in my kitchen, my hands busy making peach preserves. Look at these beautiful jars, all lined up on the counter, shining like little gems. The smell of sugar caramelizing with cinnamon is filling the whole house. And whenever I make these preserves, I remember how life comes full circle, you know? How sometimes we need to cook things slowly, with patience, so they turn out just right. My name is Clara, I'm 72 years old, and I live here in Taylorsville, North Carolina. I was born right here in this good land, and after traveling all over this country, I came back about 15 years ago. This little town is my safe harbor, you know? Every day I wake up early, make myself a fresh pot of coffee, and come to this kitchen, which is my favorite corner of the whole house. I learned to make these preserves from a very special lady who crossed my path many years ago, at a time when I desperately needed a kind gesture. She taught me that preserving fruit is like preserving good memories. We choose what we want to keep, what we want to last. You understand? Today I sell these preserves at the farmer's market every Saturday morning. It's such a joy to see people coming back to buy more, saying that Miss Clara's peach jam is the best in the region. Not to brag, but they really do turn out delicious. The secret is in the timing, my dear. You can't rush it. You have to stir slowly, let the sugar dissolve properly, feel when it's reaching the right point. This kitchen here has become my refuge, my place of peace. The copper pots I use belong to my grandmother, and every time I hold these wooden spoons worn by time, I feel like she's here with me, giving me strength. And you, my dear ones watching me right now, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? In the morning with your coffee, after lunch, or already in the evening before bed? I always read all the comments, and I'm so happy to know where you're from, and when you take a moment from your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Tell me, will you? Let's create a chain of love. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, click that red button down below, hit the bell, because every week I bring you a new story. These stories need to be told, they need to be heard. But you know, my loves, today I need to share with you a story I've carried in my heart for many years. A story of rejection, of pain, but also of overcoming, like you can't imagine. It's about a stormy night that changed my life forever, about doors that slammed shut with violence, and about how, 20 years later, I came back to knock on that same door. But in a way, nobody expected. It's about my son, my David, the boy they said would never amount to anything, and who today is a man who runs an empire. Today, as I stir these preserves and watch the peaches turn that shiny golden color, I think about how life works in mysterious ways. Some people are born with everything and lose it all. Some people are born with nothing and build castles. And there are stories that need to be told, if only to show that we should never, ever give up when everything seems lost. So grab your coffee, your tea, sit comfortably, because the story I'm going to tell you today will touch your heart. I can promise you that. I was born right here in Taylorsville, on a large farm on the outskirts of town. It was a huge property, with tobacco fields stretching as far as the eye could see. My father, Gerald, was an imposing man, tall, with a deep voice, one of those men who, when he entered a room, everyone fell silent. He had inherited those lands from my grandfather and thought he owned the world, you know? My mother, Martha, was a beautiful woman, always well-dressed, hair pulled back in a perfect bun, manicured nails, expensive dresses. She came from a prominent family in Charlotte and never let anyone forget it. Orchestrated comprehensive script adaptation, Brazilian to American English, cultural localization, channel branding integration. Continuando a adaptação. Preciso manter a essência emocional, mas mudar completamente os contextos culturais. Vou continuar adaptando todos os elementos, mantendo a estrutura narrativa, mudando nomes para americanos, mudando localidades para Carolina do Norte, região do tabaco, adaptando elementos culturais, mantendo as chamadas de ação do canal Grandparents' Tales, I Was an Only Child. My mother had difficulty getting pregnant, and when I was born in 1953, they were expecting a boy, a male heir to continue the tobacco business. But I came along, Clara. I think they never forgave me for that, you know? I grew up feeling like I was a walking disappointment. My father barely looked at me when I was little. I remember him saying to my mother, "What a shame it wasn't a boy, Martha. Now we'll have to find a son-in-law who's worth something." The house we lived in was large, bright, with huge porches and furniture that came from Charlotte and even from New York. My mother made a point of telling everyone that nothing in our house was country folk stuff, as she called it. We had maids, a foreman, workers who took care of the crops. I remember the strong smell of tobacco drying in the barns, that smell that stuck to your clothes and hair. My father spent all day supervising the work, yelling at the employees, closing deals with buyers who came from far away. My childhood was lonely, my dears. I had no siblings to play with, and my mother wouldn't let me mingle with the tenant farmers' children who lived on the surrounding land. "You're different from them, Clara. You're a refined girl from a good family," she repeated. So I played alone in the big farmyard. I had a porcelain doll that my maternal grandmother had given me, and I spent hours talking to her under a peach tree near the house. It was my favorite tree, and I loved when the peaches ripened and I could pick some in secret. My mother said it was something uneducated people did to eat fruit right off the tree. When I turned 7 in 1960, I started attending a private school in Taylorsville. My father drove me in his pickup truck every morning, but he didn't talk to me on the way. He kept grumbling about tobacco prices, about the workers, about money. Always about money. At school, the other girls thought I was strange because I was shy, too quiet. And when they came to play at my house, my mother would proudly show off the house, the furniture, the china, as if she were in a parade. I died of embarrassment. At 10 years old, I started to notice more clearly how my parents were with people. I remember one day when the foreman, Mr. Henderson, a good man with white hair, came to ask for an advance because his daughter was sick and needed medicine. My father looked at him with such contempt. My God, he said, "Henderson, I'm not a bank. If you can't work properly, there's a whole line of people out there wanting your position." The man left with his head down, and I saw a tear roll down his face. That stayed with me, you know. My mother, who had heard everything from the kitchen, still commented, "These poor people don't know how to manage money. That's why they live in poverty." I grew up hearing that kind of thing every day. I grew up watching my parents treat people as if they were inferior, as if their money made them better than everyone else. At Sunday masses at the First Baptist Church in Taylorsville, they always sat in the front pews, greeted everyone with that little smile of someone who thinks they're superior. My mother wore her most expensive dresses, her jewelry, and I had to always be impeccable, hair braided, bow matching my dress, shoes polished. But even as a child, I felt that all of this was wrong. When I was about 11, I hid food from our table in a little bag and took it to the son of a maid who worked at our house. The boy was skinny, always hungry. My mother found out and gave me such a scolding, yelled that I was ruining my upbringing, and that poor people have to learn to fend for themselves. She locked me in my room all day without eating, so I would learn to value things. It was around that time that I began to understand that I would never be like them. There was something inside me that rejected that coldness, that arrogance. I saw how the employees lowered their heads when my parents passed by, and it hurt my heart. I saw how my father closed deals without caring if he was being fair or not. He just wanted profit, always more profit. And my mother, always worried about appearances, about what others would think, about maintaining the family's status. I remember that my maternal grandmother, Martha's mother, was different. She would come visit us sometimes, came from Charlotte by bus. Even though she could afford to come by car, she said she liked the bus, liked talking to people along the way. My mother got irritated with that, said her mother was going senile. But Grandma Eleanor was affectionate with me, hugged me, made me laugh. She was the one who taught me to make my first sweet, a simple strawberry jam. "Clara, my little granddaughter," she would say, "never lose the sweetness of your heart, even if the world around you is bitter." I didn't quite understand at that age, but I kept those words like a treasure. At 12 years old in 1965, I started to notice that my parents were already making plans for my future. I would overhear their conversations about marrying me off to a rich farmer's son, about joining properties, about expanding the business. They talked about me as if I were a chess piece, a tool to increase the family's wealth. They never asked what I wanted, what I dreamed of. For them, I had only one function: to make a good marriage and continue their name. And that's how my childhood went by, between the loneliness of a big house and the weight of expectations that I didn't even know if I could, or wanted to, fulfill. The years went by, and I grew up on that farm, always with that feeling of not belonging to that place, to that life my parents had mapped out for me. When I turned 15 in 1968, things started to get more tense at home. My father intensified the conversations about my future marriage. He had a candidate in mind, Albert, son of a wealthy farmer from Statesville, a neighboring town. The young man was in his early 20s, conceited, arrogant, thought he was the greatest because his father had land and money. I detested him, but my parents organized dinners, forced meetings, tried to shove it down my throat. "Clara, you need to understand that marriage isn't about love. It's about building something solid, about joining assets," my father would say, pounding on the table in his authoritarian way. And my mother would add, arranging my hair roughly, "You'll thank us in the future. Love? Love fades, daughter. Money and respect, that's what lasts." But I didn't want that life. I didn't want to marry Albert, didn't want to be the trophy wife of a man I barely knew and who looked at me as if I were property to be acquired. I had different dreams, even though I didn't quite know what they were. I just knew it wasn't that. It was at 17 years old, in 1970, that my life truly changed. The farm needed more labor, and my father hired some new young men to work the tobacco harvest. Among them was Luke. He was 19, from a humble family in Moxville, a tiny town nearby. He had come to Taylorsville looking for work because his family's situation was difficult. He was a handsome young man, with clear eyes, an easy smile, hands calloused from so much work. But what caught my attention most was his gentle manner, his education, the respect with which he treated everyone. We met on a very hot day. I had gone to bring fresh water to the workers in the field, something I did in secret because my mother said, "That's not a lady's role." Luke thanked me with such a sincere smile, so beautiful that I felt my heart skip a beat. "Thank you so much, Miss Clara. You're very kind," he said. And there was a sweetness in that simple way of speaking that touched me deeply. From then on, I started finding excuses to appear near where he was working. We would talk quickly, secretly, always afraid someone would see. He told me about his life, about his dreams of having a little piece of land, of planting, of building an honest life. I told him about how I felt trapped in that big house, about how I didn't want to marry Albert. Luke listened to me with attention I had never received from anyone. "You deserve to be happy, Clara. You deserve to choose your own path," he would tell me, holding my hand for a second before letting go, always careful. In the following months, our love grew hidden, like a little plant sprouting in a crack in the rock. We would meet behind the tobacco barn on afternoons when everyone was busy. He kissed me for the first time under that favorite peach tree of mine, and I felt that was what I had waited for my whole life. It was true love, pure, sincere. It had nothing to do with money, with status, with my parents' plans. It was just me and him, two hearts that had found each other. But we knew it was dangerous. My father would never, ever accept me getting involved with a tenant farmer, as he called them. To him, Luke was nothing more than an employee, someone inferior, and my mother Don't even get me started. She would have a fit if she found out. So we loved each other in secret, dreaming of a future that seemed impossible. When I turned 18 in 1971, my parents intensified the pressure even more for the marriage with Albert. A date had been set. In a year I would get married whether I wanted to or not. I was desperate. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I ran away with Luke one night. We met on the road, he had gotten a ride with a trucker friend of his, and we fled to Moxville to his family's house. We stayed there hidden for 3 months. His mother, Mrs. Isabel, a woman with an enormous heart, took us in. She was poor, the house was simple, but there was a love there that I had never felt in my big, rich house. Luke worked however he could, did odd jobs, and I helped Mrs. Isabel at home. For the first time in my life, I was truly happy. We loved each other freely, without fear, without hiding, and that's where I got pregnant. I was 19 when I found out, and I remember the joy mixed with fear that I felt. Luke was radiant, hugged me tight, promised he would take care of me and our baby. We started making plans, simple plans, but full of love. But Mrs. Isabel was worried. "My children, you need to resolve this with Clara's family. You can't live running forever." She was right. I knew that eventually I would have to face my parents. And after much conversation, Luke and I decided that I would return to the farm, tell them about the pregnancy, try to make them understand. He wanted to come with me, but I asked him to stay, afraid of what my father might do to him. "If they accept me back, I'll call you. We'll get married and raise our child away from here," I said, full of hope. How naive I was, my dears. How naive. I returned to the farm on an October afternoon in 1972. I had been gone for 3 months, and I was in my 3rd month of pregnancy. My father and mother were in the living room when I entered. The atmosphere became heavy immediately. My father stood up slowly, his face red with contained rage. "Where have you been, Clara? Do you know the shame this family has suffered? Everyone talking, everyone asking." I took a deep breath and spoke, trembling. "Dad, Mom, I fell in love. I'm pregnant. The father is Luke, the young man who worked here on the farm. We love each other and want to be together, to raise our child." The silence that fell in that room was terrifying. My father went white, then purple. My mother put her hand to her mouth, eyes wide with horror. And then hell began. "You got pregnant by a tenant farmer?" my father yelled, and I had never heard him yell so loud. "By a field hand? You destroyed this family, Clara, destroyed your grandparents' name, my name, everything." My mother started crying, but it wasn't the cry of a mother worried about her daughter. It was a cry of shame, of anger. "How could you, Clara? How could you lower yourself like that? This bastard you're carrying is not my grandchild, never will be." I tried to explain, tried to make them understand that it was love, that Luke was a good man, hard-working, honest. But it was like talking to a wall. Worse, it was like talking to people whose hearts were made of stone. They didn't want to listen. They just kept repeating that I had shamed the family, that I was a disappointment, that this child had no place in that house. "You're going to get rid of this baby," my father ordered, cold as ice. "You're going to resolve this, and then you're going to marry Albert anyway. We'll make up a story, say you were sick, and life goes on." Get rid of? He was talking about abortion, about killing my baby. "Never!" I screamed, protecting my belly with my hands. "I will never do that. This is my child, and I'm going to have him." The argument became more and more violent, more cruel. My father said horrible things. My mother cried and yelled that I had killed her with grief. They locked me in my room, said I would stay there until I came to my senses. I spent days locked up, only receiving food through the door, hearing my mother outside talking quietly about doctors who could solve the problem. I was terrified, my dears. Terrified for my baby, for myself, for Luke, who was waiting for news. And then, on a night of heavy storms, something happened that changed everything forever. I stayed locked in that room for almost 2 weeks, my dears. 2 weeks that felt like 2 years. The window of my room looked out onto the yard, and I watched life out there continue as if nothing had happened. I saw the employees working, saw my father coming and going, saw everything following its normal rhythm while I was there, trapped, pregnant, afraid. My mother came 3 times a day to bring food. She didn't come in, just opened the door a crack, left the plate on the floor as if I were a dog, and left without saying a word. Sometimes I tried to talk to her through the door. "Mom, please, we need to talk. I know you're hurt, but this is your grandchild. It's your own blood." Silence. She never answered. I only heard her footsteps walking away down the hallway. The nights were the worst. I would lie in bed, hugging a pillow, talking softly to my baby. I would run my hand over my still small belly and promise, "Mommy's going to protect you, my love. No matter what happens, we'll stay together." But inside I was terrified. What if they really forced me to do something against my child? What if they managed to take me to one of those doctors who did those horrible things? I couldn't sleep properly, was in a constant state of alert, afraid that at any moment they would come get me by force. It was in the 2nd week that my father changed tactics. He started coming to talk to me through the door. But it wasn't the conversation of a concerned father, no. It was pure manipulation, my loves. He spoke in that calm, controlled voice, which was even more frightening than the screaming. "Clara, you're being selfish. Think about your mother, the state you've left her in. Think about me, what I'll have to face in town. Everyone's already talking." Albert broke off the engagement, of course. What man of respect would want you now? He would pause, waiting for me to respond, but I stayed silent, trembling. "You're still young. You have your whole life ahead of you. Get rid of this problem now, marry properly in a few years, and we'll forget this happened. But if you insist on this madness, you're throwing your life away, and ours along with it." He repeated this every day, varying the words, but always with the same message. My baby was a problem, an error, something that needed to be erased for life to return to normal. And the worst part was that he said all of this as if he were doing me a favor, as if he were trying to save me from myself. My mother also started playing the game. On a specific day, she finally opened the door and came into the room. I was sitting on the bed, and when I saw her, my heart leaped with hope. "Mom," I began, but she raised her hand, telling me to be quiet. "I brought something for you to read," she said, and threw a paper on the bed. It was one of those church pamphlets talking about sin, about dishonor, about women who disobeyed their parents and fell into disgrace. "You need to understand the gravity of what you did, Clara. You sinned. You gave yourself to a man without being married, got pregnant out of wedlock. This is a shame before God and men." She left me there with that paper in my hands. I threw it away, angry, sad. They were even using religion to manipulate me, to make me feel dirty, wrong, guilty. But I knew that loving Luke wasn't a sin. I knew my baby wasn't a curse. It was just them whose hearts were too hard to see it. The days went by, and the situation got worse. I started feeling physically ill. The food my mother brought was scarce, barely enough for one person, let alone a pregnant woman. I was losing weight, getting weak. There were days when I felt sick, dizzy, and I would scream for help, but no one came. Once I fell on the bedroom floor, too weak, and stayed there lying down, crying, thinking I was going to die there alone. I remember one specific day, it must have been about 10 days after I was locked up, when I heard my parents talking outside the room. They spoke quietly, but I could understand. "Gerald, she's not giving in. We need to take more drastic measures," my mother said. And my father replied, "I know a man in Statesville. He handles these situations. We'll take her tomorrow. She doesn't even need to agree." My blood ran cold. They were planning to take me by force. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat leaning against the door, trembling, thinking about how I would react if they came to get me. I even thought about jumping out the window, knowing I could get hurt. But what about my baby? I couldn't risk it. So I prayed like I had never prayed in my life. I asked God to protect my child, to give me strength, to show me a way out. The next morning, I felt a strange pain in my belly. It wasn't a strong pain, but it was different, uncomfortable. I tried not to pay attention, thought it was nervousness. But during the day, the pain increased, and I realized something was wrong. I went to the bathroom in the room, and when I saw, my God, there was blood. Not a lot, but there was. My heart raced. My baby, I whispered, desperate. I banged on the door hard, screaming, Mom! Dad! Please, I need help! Something's wrong, I'm bleeding! I heard hurried footsteps, the key turning. My father opened the door, saw my state of panic, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something like concern on his face. But it didn't last long. She's bleeding, Gerald, my mother said, appearing behind him. And then, instead of helping me, instead of calling a doctor, my mother said something I'll never forget. Maybe it's the solution to our problems. Maybe nature is solving what you refuse to solve. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother was hoping I would lose my baby. I fell to my knees on the floor, hugging my belly, and started crying desperately. Please take me to the hospital, my baby, please. But my father just shook his head. You created this situation, Clara. Now deal with the consequences. And he closed the door again, left me there, bleeding, desperate, begging. The pain increased throughout the day. I dragged myself to the bed, curled up in a fetal position, praying, crying, talking to my baby. Hold on, my love. Mommy's not going to give up on you. Never. We're going to survive. We're going to get out of here. When night came, there was a terrible storm outside. Thunder shook the house, lightning lit up my room, and the pain had gotten much worse. I had a fever, was sweating cold, the bleeding had increased. I knew I was bad, very bad. And that's when I made the most difficult decision of my life. I got up from the bed with all the strength I had left and started pounding on the door with my fists. I hit until my hands hurt. I'm leaving! I screamed with all the strength of my lungs. I'm leaving this house and you'll never see me again, but let me out! Let me get help for my child! I heard quick footsteps. The door flew open. It was my mother, with her face distorted with rage. My father came right behind. They looked at me, pale, sweating, with blood running down my legs, and even then I didn't feel pity in those looks. I only felt disgust. You want to leave? My father said, his voice low and dangerous. Then go, but never come back. This house is no place for you and that bastard you're carrying. My mother grabbed my arm hard, with a violence I had never seen in her. Her nails dug into my skin, and she started dragging me out of the room. I was weak, dizzy, my legs barely held me, but she didn't care. I felt the skin on my arm burn where her nails dug in, but the physical pain was nothing compared to what I felt in my heart. My father came behind, in silence, with that stone face, as if he were taking trash out of the house. His footsteps echoed heavy on the wooden floor. Each beat seemed like a sentence. Mom, please, I begged as she pulled me down the hallway. My bare feet slipped on the polished floor, leaving blood marks. I need a doctor, my baby, please. Look at me, Mom, I'm your daughter. But it was like screaming in the wind. She wasn't listening, didn't want to listen. Her face was transfigured with hate, with disgust, the veins in her neck bulging, her mouth twisted in a grimace I had never seen. It was as if she had transformed into another person, into something that had nothing motherly, nothing human. We passed through the living room where I had played as a child. I caught a glimpse of the armchair where my grandmother Eleanor used to sit to talk with me, and a sob came from my throat. That house that had been my whole life was spitting me out as if I had never belonged there. We went down the stairs, me almost falling because my legs had no strength, and went straight to the front door. With each step I stumbled, and my mother pulled me harder, without patience, without care. My knee hit one of the steps, and I screamed in pain, but she didn't even look. The storm outside was violent, my dears. The rain beat on the roof like stones. The thunder echoed, making the whole structure of the house shake. And when my mother opened that door, an icy gust came in with the water, wetting the entrance floor, extinguishing the candles on the sideboard. "Mom, no!" I screamed, holding onto the doorframe with the strength I had left. My fingers grabbed the wood desperately, my nails scratching, trying to hold on to anything. "At least let me get something, some clothes, some money. Let me take a picture of Grandma Eleanor, please." But she started pushing my fingers to let go, so hard it hurt, bending them back until I had to let go. "You're not taking anything from this house," she screamed right in my face, so close I felt the spit spray. Her eyes were full of a rage that seemed to come from a very deep, very dark place, a place I didn't know. "Nothing here is yours. You gave up everything when you decided to lower yourself with that filthy tenant. You chose the gutter, now go live in it." And then my father approached. He wasn't calm anymore, no. He had that vein bulging on his forehead, his face red as embers, fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. "You sullied this family's name, Clara," he said, his voice coming out in a low growl that was scarier than any scream. "You spat on the memory of your grandparents, great-grandparents, on my reputation, on everything we built over generations. And now you want us to take care of you? For us to support the fruit of your immorality? For us to accept this bastard as part of this family?" He spat the word bastard with so much venom it seemed to burn. And then he grabbed my arm hard. The same hand that had never really hugged me, that had never caressed me, was now hurting me and pushed me out with such violence that my feet barely touched the porch steps. I flew through the air for a second and fell on my knees on the wet porch wood, the rain already drenching me in seconds, cold as melted ice. I tried to get up, but I was so weak, so dizzy. My hands slipped on the smooth, wet wood. "Please," I sobbed, extending my hand to them, the rainwater mixing with my tears. "I'm your daughter. You can't do this to me. I'm bleeding. I could die here. My baby could die. You'll have 2 deaths on your conscience. Is that what you want?" But that's when my mother said the phrase that was engraved in my soul like hot iron branding cattle. She bent down, grabbed my chin hard, forcing me to look in her eyes, and spoke slowly, with each word weighing like lead, each syllable being spit out with pure hate. "Never come back here. You're dead to us. This bastard you're carrying is not my grandchild, never will be, and you're no longer my daughter. You died to me the day you opened your legs for that nobody. If I see you again on this property, I'll call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. Get out of my sight." And then she pushed me with her foot, pushed me as if I were a dead animal on the road, and I rolled down the 2 porch steps and fell in the mud at the entrance. The cold mud got in my mouth, my nose, my eyes. I coughed, spit, trying to clean my face. The door slammed behind me with a crash that was muffled by an enormous thunder that made the earth shake. I heard the lock being closed, that metallic sound that meant the end, that meant death. I heard my father say from the other side, "Turn off the front lights. I don't even want to see her shadow." And there I was, fallen on the ground, in rain that felt like 1,000 needles piercing my skin, in mud that stuck to everything, bleeding, alone, expelled, rejected, abandoned like a dog that nobody wants anymore. I stayed there prostrate for a time. I can't say if it was minutes or hours. Time had stopped making sense. The rain was falling so hard I could barely breathe. I had to turn my head to the side so I wouldn't choke on the water. The mud was sticking to my body, my face, my hair, getting into my torn clothes. I felt warm blood running down my legs, mixing with the cold water, forming small red streams that the rain washed away. And the pain. The physical pain was terrible, as if someone were twisting my insides with their hands. But the pain in my heart was even worse. It was a pain that had no name. A pain of being rejected by the people who should love you more than anything in the world. I looked back at the iron gate at the entrance, and through the rain, I could see the big house illuminated. The living room lights were on. They had only turned off the front ones, as my father had ordered. And through the window, fogged by rain, I could see my parents' silhouettes. They were there, dry, warm, safe, probably sitting down to dinner, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just thrown their own pregnant and bleeding daughter into the storm to die. "My God," I whispered, hugging my belly with both muddy hands. "My God, don't let my baby die. Please, he's not to blame for anything. He didn't choose to be born like this, in this situation. I don't care about myself, but save him. Please, let him live." A lightning bolt cut the sky right above me, illuminating everything with a white and blinding light, and for a second, I saw my situation for real. I was a 19-year-old girl, abandoned, without a penny in my pocket, without dry clothes, without a place to go, pregnant and bleeding, possibly losing my baby right there in that mud. And the only ones to blame for this were inside that house, eating, sleeping, living, without any remorse. It was at that moment, my dears, that something changed inside me. In the middle of all that despair, all that pain, all that agony, a thing was born that I had never felt before. A cold rage, deep, and along with it a steel determination. It wasn't just anger. It was a promise I made there, fallen in that mud, almost dying. I tried to get up. I managed to get on my knees first, leaning on my hands. The mud dripped off me in thick brown waves. Then I managed to raise one foot, then the other. I stood up, staggering, shaking all over, but standing. And I looked at that house for the last time. "I'm going to survive," I said out loud, to the rain, to the night, to God, to my parents who couldn't hear me but who one day would know these words. "I'm going to survive, and I'm going to raise my child. I'm going to turn him into a man so great, so powerful, that you'll regret every second of this night. One day, you'll beg for his forgiveness. And on that day, I want to be there to see it." I turned my back on that house and started walking, dragging myself along the dirt road that led to town. The rain kept falling, but I didn't care anymore. Every step was agony. My bare feet stepped on sharp rocks, on branches, on holes full of icy water. I fell, got up, fell again. My legs trembled so much they barely held me. The bleeding continued. The pain continued, feeling the weakness taking over, but I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I would faint there. And if I fainted, I would die. As simple as that. The road seemed endless. It was so dark I could barely see an inch ahead. Only the lightning illuminated the path from time to time, showing the muddy road stretching forward, always forward, without end. I stumbled on rocks, on holes full of water, on tree roots. My hands were cut from falling so much and trying to support myself. At a certain point, after what seemed like an eternity of walking, my body simply couldn't take it anymore. My legs failed and I fell face first in the mud. I tried to get up, but I had no more strength, nothing. It was as if someone had turned off a switch inside me. I stayed there, on all fours, vomiting water and bile, coughing, crying. The taste of blood in my mouth mixed with mud. The pain in my belly had increased so much I could barely breathe. "I'm not going to make it," I thought, letting my head fall in the mud. "I'm going to die here on the road and nobody will ever know. They'll find my body in a few days, swollen, eaten by animals, and they'll say I deserved it. That's what happened to girls who disobeyed their parents." Tears came out, mixed with the rain, and I felt the deepest despair a human being can feel. The despair of knowing you're going to die and not being able to do anything to prevent it. But then, at that moment of total giving up, when I was ready to close my eyes and let it all end, I felt something. A tiny movement, almost imperceptible, deep in my belly. So soft I almost thought I had imagined it. But no, it was there. My baby. My child was there, alive, fighting to survive with me. and it was as if he was telling me, "Don't give up, Mommy. I'm here. I'm with you. We can do it." That tiny movement was like an electric shock to my whole body. I opened my eyes suddenly, cleaned the mud from my face as best I could. "You're alive," I whispered, running my hand over my belly. "My baby, you're alive. I felt you." And a smile appeared on my face, in the middle of all that misery. A smile of pure relief, of pure gratitude. I found strength I didn't know I had, strength that came from somewhere very deep, very primitive. The mother's instinct, this thing that has no explanation, but that exists and is stronger than everything. I stood up again, leaning on a nearby tree. I cleaned the mud from my face with trembling hands from cold and exhaustion, and I continued, one foot in front of the other, slowly, very slowly. But I continued. "We can do it, my love," I whispered to my baby, talking to him as if he could hear me. "Mommy's not going to give up on you, never. You gave me strength now, showed me you're alive, so now it's my turn to protect you. I promise, my son, we're going to get through this." After what seemed like an eternity walking in the dark and rain, after falling about 3 or 4 more times, after thinking I would faint with every step, I saw something that seemed like a heavenly vision. A light. A weak yellow light, but that shone in the darkness like a star. It was a house, small, humble, on the side of the road. It was nothing compared to my parents' mansion. It was a simple little house, wooden, with a tin roof where the rain beat making noise. But at that moment, that simple little house with its weak little light in the window was the most beautiful, most welcome thing I had ever seen in my life. I used the rest of my strength to get there. I staggered through the dirt yard, passed by some wet chickens pecking under a shed, and finally reached the door. I knocked, weakly. My hand barely made a sound on the old wood. I waited. Nothing. I took a deep breath, trying to find strength to knock louder. I knocked again, this time with a closed fist, harder, letting my last remnants of energy come out in that knock. "Help!" I tried to scream, but my voice came out almost in a hoarse whisper, dragged. "Please, is anyone there? Help!" I heard movements inside, shuffling footsteps. A woman's voice grumbling something about who was knocking on the door at that time of night. The door opened slowly, and appeared a lady, already elderly, disheveled gray hair, in a flowered nightgown with a kerosene lantern in her hand. The weak light illuminated my face, and when she saw me, soaked, covered in mud from head to toe, with blood running down my legs, pregnant, shaking, almost fainting, her eyes widened so much it seemed they would pop out. "My Lord in heaven, child!" she screamed, almost dropping the lantern. "But what happened to you? Walter! Walter!" She set the lantern down on a little table at the entrance and held me by the shoulders before I fell. "Walter, come here quick. For the love of God, there's a young woman here needing help." An older man appeared, also elderly, about 60 years old, in old pants and a t-shirt, white hair all sticking up, eyes still sleepy, but that woke up completely when they saw me. "Holy Mary!" he exclaimed. "Nancy, this girl's bleeding. Bring her inside, quick. Come on, let's get her inside. Help me here, Walter," Mrs. Nancy commanded, and the two of them grabbed me, one on each side, and carried me into the house. I could barely keep my eyes open. Everything was spinning, getting blurry. The house was small, humble, with a little smell of old coffee, wood stove smoke, and kerosene from the lanterns. There were some saints on the wall, a crucifix, old photos in simple frames. Mrs. Nancy laid me on an old sofa, worn fabric but clean, and started taking off my wet and muddy clothes carefully, covering me with blankets that smelled of homemade soap and sun. Mr. Walter lit more lanterns to brighten better, and the house was illuminated with that yellowish, trembling light. "Child, you're bleeding a lot," Mrs. Nancy said, her voice concerned but firm, controlled. She had that way of someone who had seen a lot in life and knew how to keep calm in emergencies. You're pregnant? How many months? Tell me, daughter, what happened? 3.5 months, I managed to say, shaking so much my teeth chattered, making noise. I felt cold to the bones, a cold that seemed like it would never go away. Please, my baby, save my baby. My parents threw me out. I have nowhere to go, but please, save my baby. The two exchanged a look. One of those looks of a couple who lived so many years together, they don't need words to understand each other. Walter, get the truck. We need to take her to the hospital in Taylorsville. Now. This girl could die, and the baby too, she ordered, and Mr. Walter was already grabbing the keys before she even finished speaking. Mrs. Nancy knelt down beside me, took my cold and dirty hand between hers, which were rough and calloused, but warm, so warm. And then she looked at me, with brown eyes full of genuine kindness, of a humanity I hadn't seen in so long, that I thought didn't exist in the world anymore. Calm down, my daughter, she said, squeezing my hand. We're going to help you. You and your baby are going to be okay. I promise we'll do everything we can. And there, in that simple little house, so different from the mansion where I had grown up, in the arms of that lady who didn't even know me, who didn't know my name, who didn't know anything about me, but who welcomed me when my own parents threw me out to die, I finally let the crying out. It wasn't a silent cry. It was a cry of pain, of relief, of despair, of gratitude, all together. I cried everything I had held in during those horrible weeks, everything I had endured alone. And even in the middle of all that pain, that horror, that tragedy, I felt a tiny little thing being born in my chest. Hope. A fragile hope like a candle flame in the wind, but that was there, refusing to go out. Mr. Walter drove that old truck through the rain, like he was a race car driver. Mrs. Nancy was in the back seat with me, holding me, passing wet cloths on my forehead, praying quietly. Hold on, daughter. We're almost there. The hospital isn't far. Every pothole in the dirt road made me moan in pain, but I bit my lips and held tight to that lady's hand who had become my guardian angel. We arrived at Taylorsville General Hospital past midnight. Mr. Walter honked at the emergency entrance, and soon 2 nurses appeared with a stretcher. They carried me inside, and the last thing I remember before fainting was Mrs. Nancy screaming, "She's pregnant! 3.5 months! She's bleeding a lot!" I woke up the next day in a hospital room, with the smell of ether and medicine. There was an IV in my hand, and when I tried to move, a sharp pain in my belly made me stop. A nurse noticed I had woken up and came running. "Calm down, young lady. Don't move much. You had a placental abruption, but we managed to stabilize it." "My baby?" was the first thing I could ask, my voice coming out weak and hoarse. "Is my baby alive?" She smiled, a tired but sincere smile. "Yes, his little heart is beating strong. You were lucky, girl. 1 more hour in the rain, and we couldn't have saved you both." I cried with relief. I cried so much that the nurse had to calm me down, saying that crying was bad, that I needed absolute rest. But they were tears of gratitude, of immense relief. My child was alive. My child had survived that horrible night. Mrs. Nancy and Mr. Walter visited me every day during the week I was hospitalized. They brought fruit, chicken broth that Mrs. Nancy made at home, clean clothes. "We don't have much, Clara," she would say, sitting in the chair next to the bed. "But the little we have, we share with you. When you get out of here, you come live with us until you recover properly." I had no words to thank them. That couple of poor farmers who didn't even know me were treating me better than my own rich parents ever had. "Why are you doing this for me?" I asked one of those days, holding Mrs. Nancy's calloused hand. She looked at me with those eyes full of kindness and said, "Because it's the right thing to do, daughter, because everyone deserves a second chance, and because I've also been through hard times, and I know what it's like to have no one." It was Mrs. Nancy who sent word to Luke in Moxville. But the answer that came broke my heart again, my dears. Luke had left. His mother, Mrs. Isabel sent word that he had gotten work on a farm far away in Montana and had left by truck with other workers 3 days before. There was no phone there, no way to let him know. Mrs. Isabel didn't even know exactly the name of the farm, just knew it was near Billings. I understood at that moment that I was alone. Really alone. Without family, without my child's father, without anything. Just me, my baby in my belly, and the kindness of 2 strangers. When I left the hospital, I went to live in Mrs. Nancy and Mr. Walter's house. They had a little room in the back that they used to store things, and they cleaned everything, put in an old but clean bed, and made that my home. I spent the next months there, resting, helping where I could, but mainly taking care of myself and my baby. It was Mrs. Nancy who took care of me when I had morning sickness, who gave me mint tea to feel better, who talked with me on nights I couldn't sleep, remembering that terrible night. "Clara," she would say, "you need to transform this pain into strength. This baby you're carrying, he's going to be your reason to live. You're young, you're smart, you have your whole life ahead of you." My son was born on June 15th, 1973. It was a difficult birth in Mrs. Nancy's own house, with the help of a midwife from the neighborhood. When I heard his first cry, my dears, it was as if all the pain I had gone through suddenly made sense. He was tiny, red, perfect. When they put him in my arms, I looked at that scrunched little face and made a promise. "David," I said, because I had already chosen the name. It means beloved. Mommy promises you're going to have everything I didn't have. You're going to be great, you're going to be strong, and nobody will ever be able to humiliate you like they humiliated us. The first months were very difficult. I had no money, I had nothing, but I started doing odd jobs, washing clothes for others, sewing, anything to earn a few dollars and not depend only on Mrs. Nancy and Mr. Walter's kindness. David grew up strong and healthy, and every smile of his, every time he squeezed my finger with his tiny little hand, gave me strength to continue. It was Mr. Walter who gave me the idea that would change our lives. He worked as a sharecropper on a tobacco plantation, and one day he came home commenting that the property owner was selling part of the lands. "It's a bargain, Clara. Nobody wants to buy because they say the land is weak. But I know that land. I worked it my whole life. With the right treatment, it does produce." I had saved up a little money from the odd jobs. It wasn't much, but it was something. "How much is he asking?" I asked, and when he told me the amount, my heart raced. It was a little more than I had. If I borrowed a little from Mrs. Nancy, it would work. And that's how, my dears, at 20 years old, with a 6-month-old baby in my arms, I bought my first piece of land. It was small, just about 7 acres, but it was mine and my son's. Mr. Walter taught me everything about planting tobacco: when to plant, how to care for it, when to harvest, how to dry it. He worked during the day on his property and came to help me in the late afternoon and on weekends. The first year was a lot of work. A lot. I worked in the field with David tied on my back. When he was very small, I would leave him sleeping in a basket in the shade while I weeded, planted, harvested. My hands became calloused, my back hurt every day. But when I sold my first harvest and received the money, my dears, it was one of the greatest joys of my life. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was mine. Earned with my sweat, with my work. I used part to buy more land, part to improve what I had, and part to ensure David had what he needed. The years went by, and I grew in the business. I learned everything about tobacco, the best seeds, the best buyers, how to negotiate prices. I discovered I had a talent for this, for doing business, for seeing opportunities that others didn't see. In 1978, 5 years after I bought that first little piece of land, I already had about 37 acres and was hiring people to help me. David grew up watching me work. From when he was very little, he went with me to the field, saw me negotiate with buyers, saw me do calculations, plan plantings. "Mommy," he would ask when he was about 6 years old, "why do we work so hard?" And I would say, Because we're building an empire, my son. One day, all of this will be yours, and you're going to be so great that nobody will ever be able to look down on you. I told him little by little as he grew up about what had happened, about the grandparents who had rejected us, about that stormy night. I didn't tell him with anger, but with firmness. My son, there are people in the world who think they're better than others just because they have money. People who step on others because they can. But you're never going to be like that. You're going to be strong, you're going to be rich, but you're going to have a heart. And one day we're going to show these people what we're capable of. In 1985, 12 years after I started, I already had more than 120 acres and had opened a small tobacco processing company. I didn't just plant anymore. I also bought from other producers and resold processed. The profits were growing, and with them, my ambition too. David, at 12 years old, was already helping me in the business. He was a smart boy, intelligent, learned quickly. I put him in the best private school in Taylorsville, the same school where I had studied, but now I was paying with my own money. He knew English, math, administration. I was molding him to be a leader, a businessman, someone nobody could look down on. In 1990, 17 years after starting from zero, my company already had a name: Imperial Tobacco. I had more than 500 acres, 3 processing warehouses, and was exporting outside of the United States. It was one of the largest producers in the region. And most importantly, I discovered that the lands around my parents' farm were being sold. The owners were going bankrupt, changing business, giving up. And I was buying one by one. David was 17 and was already my right-hand man. He participated in meetings, closed deals, negotiated contracts. He had graduated as the best student in school and had been accepted in business administration at the best university in Charlotte. But he preferred to stay and work with me, learning and practice. "Mom," he would say, "university can wait. Now it's time for us to really grow." And it was in 1993, 20 years after that terrible night, that the news I had been waiting for arrived. My parents' farm was bankrupt, completely bankrupt. My father had made bad deals, lost money, gotten into debt. And now he was trying to sell the property to pay the debts. The only company interested in buying was Imperial Tobacco, my company. When I heard this, I sat down with David, who was now 20 years old, a grown man, handsome, strong, intelligent, and said, "My son, the time has come. Remember everything I told you, about your grandparents, about that night. The time has come for us to close this circle." And my son, looking at me with those determined eyes he had inherited from me, replied, "Mom, they're going to regret every word, every gesture of that night, I promise." And here I am today, my dears, at 72 years old, in this same Taylorsville where it all began. I came back here 15 years ago, after living for a while in Charlotte, taking care of the company's expansion. This kitchen where I make my preserves is in a simple house, comfortable, in a quiet neighborhood. It's not a mansion. It doesn't need to be. I learned that happiness doesn't live in a big house. David lives in Charlotte, where Imperial Tobacco's headquarters is. My son built a real empire, my loves. Today his company isn't just tobacco. It's a multinational that operates in various sectors. He's 52 years old, married to a wonderful woman, Patricia, and gave me 3 beautiful grandchildren who are the joy of my life. They come visit me every month, and when they arrive, this house becomes a party. But I know you want to know what happened that day, right? At that meeting in 1993, 20 years after that horrible stormy night. David and I entered that conference room in our own company. My parents were there, sitting, old, hunched over. The clothes that once were fine were now worn. They didn't recognize me immediately. 20 years had changed my face, my manner. I was no longer that scared girl. I was a businesswoman, powerful, owner of everything they needed. When they finally recognized me, I saw the shock on their faces. My mother dropped the old purse she was holding. My father went white as paper. "Clara?" my mother whispered, incredulous. "Hello, Mother." "Hello, Father," I said, sitting at the head of the table. "Remember that night, when you threw me in the rain to die? When you said I was dead to you?" They tried to speak, tried to explain, but David interrupted them. "I'm the bastard you wanted to throw in the trash," he said, slamming the documents on the table. "I'm the problem you wanted to eliminate, and today I'm the man who bought every one of your debts. The farm is now ours, and you have 24 hours to leave my property." My father tried to appeal, tried to say we were family, that they had made a mistake, but they were old. They needed help. But I looked in his eyes and said, "Family? You taught me that family means nothing when pride is at stake. You made your choice that night. Today, I make mine." I didn't give them money, but I didn't leave them on the street. I bought a small house in Statesville, a very small one, and put it in their name. "You'll have a roof and a monthly allowance to survive," I said. "Not because you deserve it, but because I'm not like you. I don't throw anyone in the rain to die, but never come near me or my son again." My father died 5 years later, in 1998, of pure heartbreak. We never exchanged another word. My mother is still alive. She's 94 years old, lives alone in that little house. I know she receives the monthly allowance, but she never tried to look for me. I think she carries the shame of what she did to this day. And you know what's funny, my dears? I don't feel anger anymore. It passed. That anger that moved me for years, that made me build all of this, it's gone. What I feel today is a deep peace. A gratitude for having survived, for having raised my son, for having transformed all that pain into something good. David is an upright man, fair, strong. He never stepped on anyone to grow. He treats his employees with respect, makes donations, helps communities. He broke the curse of that family of arrogant and cruel people. And that, for me, is the greatest victory of all. Today, when I wake up and come to make my preserves, when I smell the sweet scent of fruit cooking, when I put the little jars to sell at the farmer's market, I give thanks. I give thanks for Mrs. Nancy and Mr. Walter, who have already passed, but who were the real parents I had. I give thanks for every good person who crossed my path and extended their hand when I was on the ground. And that's why, my dears, I want to leave a message for you who are listening to me, especially for you who might be going through a difficult situation with your family, who was rejected, expelled, looked down upon. Listen well to what this grandma is going to tell you. Family rejection is one of the deepest pains that exists. When the people who should love you turn their backs on you, it seems like the world has ended. It seems like you're worth nothing, that you don't deserve love. But that's a lie, my child. It's a lie from the devil. You are worth it. You do deserve love. And if your biological family doesn't see your worth, you'll find your true family along the way. It could be a kind neighbor like my Mrs. Nancy was. It could be a friend, a teacher, a community. Real family isn't just blood. It's who stays by your side when everything falls apart. I learned that the best revenge isn't destroying who hurt you. The best revenge is you getting back up so strong, so bright, that your very existence becomes a testimony of overcoming. It's you looking in the mirror and seeing an upright, honest person who didn't become bitter despite the pain. I could have let that night destroy me. I could have given up on my baby. I could have surrendered to despair. But I chose to fight. I chose to get up every day, even when everything hurt, even when it seemed impossible. And you can also make that choice. If you're pregnant and your family rejected you, know that your baby is a blessing, not a curse. If you were thrown out of your home for loving someone your family doesn't approve of, know that true love is always worth it. If you were rejected for not following the path your parents wanted, know that your life is yours, and you have the right to choose your own destiny. And one thing I need to say, my loves, never, never let pain transform you into a cruel person. I could have let my parents die in complete misery, But I didn't. Because I'm not like them. And you don't need to be like the people who hurt you either. Be better. Be stronger. Be the person you would have liked to have by your side when everything was bad. Life comes full circle, my dears. Who's on top today might be on the bottom tomorrow. Who's suffering today might be smiling tomorrow. But the important thing isn't where you are now, it's where you're going and what kind of person you're becoming along the way. And look, I know many of you are going through situations of family rejection, contempt, humiliation. So I want you to do something for me now. Take a deep breath and repeat with me. I am strong. I will overcome. My story doesn't end here. Because it doesn't end, my child. Your story is just beginning. And you're going to write such a beautiful ending, so powerful, that even you will be surprised. Now, my dears, I need to make a special request of you. If this story touched your heart, if you understand the pain of rejection, if you believe that everyone deserves a second chance, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, click that subscribe button down below and hit the bell. These stories need to be told, need to reach those who need to hear that it's possible to overcome, that it's possible to rebuild your life from scratch. Second, share this video with someone you know is going through a difficult situation with their family. Sometimes a story like this is all a person needs to not give up. And third, leave here in the comments just one word: overcome. Just that word. Whoever watched until here, whoever understood the message, write overcome. I want to see a chain of strength, of hope, of people who believe it's possible to start over. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. This word will transform into a sea of hope for other people who will read it. Thank you for listening to me with patience, with affection. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. And remember, you are not alone. Never are. There's always someone rooting for you, even if you don't yet know who. A kiss on each of your hearts. God bless you, and see you in the next story.